Lily always dreamed of owning a mechanic shop, so when she stumbles across an old abandoned gas station for sale, it feels like a dream come true. But when she starts uncovering the secrets hidden beneath the station's cracked floorboards, she realizes she's not just restoring a business, she's unlocking a mystery that could change her life forever. But there's one catch. Some secrets were never meant to be found. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode is even more mind-blowing than this one. Let's get started. Lily James stood at the edge of the property, a deep breath filling her lungs as she took in the sight of the abandoned gas station. The faded, cracked sign swayed gently in the wind. The word, fuel, barely legible against the peeling blue paint. The weeds had long since claimed the once bustling lot, and the pumps, now rusted and unmoving, seemed like relics from another time. But to Lily, this was a gold mine. For as long as she could remember, she dreamed of having her own garage, her own space where she could do what she loved, fix cars, restore engines, and bring life back to the broken machines that had always fascinated her. A mechanic by trade, Lily had spent the last 10 years working in a series of shops that always felt temporary. She'd fixed cars, but she'd never had the chance to build something of her own, until now. The town of Silver Creek was quiet, its sleepy streets lined with aging buildings and small-town charm. The gas station had been out of commission for years, a casualty of bigger chains moving in and the town's decline. Still, there was something about it that called to her. She'd scoured listings for months, looking for the perfect place to turn into her own dream, and when she found this hidden away on a side street, with a price tag that seemed too good to be true, she didn't hesitate. Just a little cleaning, a fresh coat of paint, and some new equipment, she muttered to herself, already picturing how she'd transform the place. The bones were there. A small office, an attached garage, and plenty of space for a few cars to park. She imagined the sound of engines purring in the background, the smell of fresh oil filling the air. It was perfect. With a soft chuckle, she picked up her keys and approached the front door. The glass was cracked, and the paint on the trim had long faded, but Lily was undeterred. This wasn't about the building. It was about what she could make of it, what it could become with her touch. She pushed the door open with a creak that seemed to echo through the empty space. The air inside was musty, filled with the faint smell of old gasoline and dust. Sunlight streamed through the dirty windows, casting shadows on the worn tile floor. The office was small, cluttered with outdated magazines and boxes of old paperwork. But to Lily, it was a treasure trove of possibilities. "I can do this," she whispered, as if convincing herself. She walked behind the counter, running her fingers along the faded wood. There was something comforting about the mess, the disorder. This was the kind of place that needed her. A place that had been forgotten, waiting to be restored. Her mind raced with plans. New signage, a fresh coat of paint on the garage doors, a waiting area with comfy chairs for customers. This was just the beginning. The walls of the office were lined with old maps of the area, some yellowed with age, others still in pristine condition. Lily's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. It was more than just the gas station. It was a piece of history, and now it was hers. But as she glanced around, a small, crumpled piece of paper caught her eye. It was wedged between a stack of dusty files on the counter. Curious, Lily picked it up. The paper was old, edges frayed, but the words on it were clear. For sale. Abandoned gas station. Historic property. She turned the page, her fingers brushing against the rough surface. There were notes scrawled in the margins, directions, prices, everything someone would need to know if they were planning to restore the station. But what caught her attention was the last line. "Beware the basement." Lily raised an eyebrow. The basement? She turned the paper over, but there was nothing more. A frown creased her brow as she tucked the note into her jacket pocket. It was probably just a warning about structural damage, or perhaps some local superstition, but a flicker of curiosity stirred in her chest. Something about that note didn't sit right. "All right," she muttered, shaking off the unease. "Let's get to work." As the sun set behind the gas station, casting long shadows across the lot, Lily began to map out her plans. Little did she know, the true challenge she'd face in restoring this place wouldn't come from the building itself, but from the secrets hidden beneath it. By morning, Lily was back on site with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a crowbar in the other. The scent of dew and rust clung to the air, and the low whine of cicadas buzzed from the tall weeds crowding the fence line. She'd parked her beat-up pickup just behind the station and propped open the front door with a brick. This wasn't going to be a quick cleanup job. She knew that now. But she was used to starting with less than ideal conditions. That's how her entire life had been built, one problem at a time. She started in the main office, clearing out boxes of moldy paperwork, old oil receipts, and cigarette-burned furniture. Each load she dragged to the front lot felt like peeling back layers of time. Someone had worked here, probably lived a whole life behind this counter. There were Polaroids thumbtacked to a bulletin board, cars, people, holidays, each one curled at the corners like they'd been trying to forget themselves. One photo caught her attention. A man with sunburned arms stood in front of the station, flanked by a '76 Chevy and a teenage girl with a baseball cap pulled low. They both smiled like they didn't know the world could fall apart. The back read, "Ray and Elsie, summer before she left." Lily stared at it for a moment, before gently pinning it back. It felt wrong to toss them away, even if she didn't know who they were. By noon, the front office was nearly bare. She wiped sweat from her brow and took a moment to breathe. Her arms ached. Her shirt clung to her back. But something about the physical work grounded her. It was messy, tiring, and slow, but it was honest. No one telling her what to do. No clipboard deadlines. Just progress, inch by inch. She moved into the garage next. The main bay doors groaned as she forced them open, light flooding into a space thick with dust motes and silence. Tools were still scattered on the benches, cobwebbed and rust-flecked. An engine hoist sagged in the corner. An old Craftsman toolbox sat rusted shut, its handle half missing. She knelt beside it and tried to pry it open with a flathead screwdriver, grunting as the latch finally gave. Inside were rows of sockets and wrenches, coated in grime but otherwise intact. A small sticker was pressed into the lid's interior. Property of Elsie Ray. "Guess she left in a hurry," Lily murmured. As she examined the space, she noticed something odd. In the far corner of the garage, near the rear wall, the concrete floor had a large patch that didn't match the rest. The color was wrong, slightly darker, smoother, like it had been redone. Recently, too. She tapped her boot against it. It echoed. Crouching down, she ran her hands along the edges. There was a hairline seam running along a perfect rectangle too clean to be accidental. She stood up slowly, heart starting to beat a little faster. It wasn't uncommon for old garages to have maintenance hatches or storm shelters. But this didn't look like either. Grabbing a long pry bar, she wedged it into the seam and leaned her weight into it. The concrete shifted with a low, gritty sound. Dust puffed up from the edges as a portion of the floor lifted just a few inches, enough to reveal darkness beneath. It wasn't just a hatch, it was a door. She froze. The muscles in her shoulders tightened. A part of her wanted to slam it shut and pretend she hadn't found anything. But another part, the same stubborn curiosity that made her a great mechanic, wouldn't let it go. Instead of opening it further, she eased the slab back into place and stepped away, palms dirty, heart hammering. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "That's new." She glanced out toward the empty lot, the sky starting to deepen with the late afternoon Sunday. Everything felt suddenly quieter, heavier. That night, back at her tiny rental, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, that strange patch of concrete still etched into her thoughts. Who seals up a floor in a backroom garage? And why? Lily didn't know it yet. But the hatch she'd found wasn't just the start of a new renovation. It was the beginning of a buried story. One the town had almost forgotten, and one that wasn't quite ready to stay hidden. The next morning, Lily arrived early, fueled by restless curiosity and a sense that something was off about the garage floor. She'd tried to dismiss it the night before, but the more she thought about it, the more questions gnawed at her. Who had sealed up the floor? And why? It didn't seem like a typical repair job. This felt more deliberate, like someone didn't want whatever was underneath found. She didn't waste time on her usual coffee. She went straight to the garage. The sun had just risen, casting long shadows across the property as she approached the hatch. The entire building felt different today, still quiet, but somehow filled with an energy she couldn't ignore. After a quick inspection, she grabbed the crowbar again and pried the concrete slab up, the metal scraping against the stone as the floor panel lifted. Beneath it was a ladder, rusted and narrow, leading down into the darkness. Lily's heart skipped. The air below was cool, thick with the scent of damp earth and disuse. It smelled like something had been hidden away for a long time. She hesitated, her hand resting on the ladder rung, a chill running up her spine. Something wasn't right. But she'd come this far, and something about the mystery of the place pulled her in. Lily took a deep breath and descended. The basement, or whatever it was cold, colder than it should have been, considering the summer heat above. The faint hum of old pipes could be heard in the walls, but there was an eerie silence in the air that felt almost too perfect, too still. She adjusted her eyes to the low light, searching for anything unusual. The walls were lined with thick concrete, and the floor was covered in a fine layer of dust, untouched by time. But there, on the far side of the room, stood a large metal door, rusted and imposing, with a heavy padlock dangling from its clasp. It was old, far older than the station itself. Lily moved closer, her boots crunching over the floor. She could see faint markings on the door, something like a symbol or a logo. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. The padlock seemed to be there for a reason, like it had been put in place to keep something inside. A shiver ran down her spine. Maybe I'm just imagining things, Lily muttered to herself. But even as she spoke, she knew it wasn't true. There was something buried down here, something tied to this place, to the town. She walked the perimeter, noting the strange organization of the room. It wasn't cluttered like the rest of the gas station. The room looked like it had been untouched, maintained, almost as if someone was expecting to return. Her eyes landed on an old, dusty filing cabinet in the corner. With a determined exhale, she walked over and opened it. Inside, there were papers, old and yellowed. A few binders had fallen to the side, and some had loose papers spilling out. She flipped through them quickly, mostly tax records, contracts, and odd invoices. But something caught her eye. A name, familiar, but forgotten. Elsie Ray. She paused, the name ringing in her mind. Ray, the same name from the photo. The girl in the photo with the '76 Chevy. The paperwork wasn't much, but it seemed to suggest that Elsie Ray hadn't just been a mechanic. She'd worked directly for the gas station's original owner. And the records were meticulous, far more so than any regular business papers. Some of the invoices referred to special equipment and top security deliveries. Nothing too specific, but it felt off. Lily's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a gas station, this was more. She could feel the weight of the past pressing in, the knowledge that this place had been more than what it seemed. And Elsie, she'd known something. She had to have. As Lily gathered the papers into her arms, she noticed something else. Tucked behind a folder was a small, frayed journal. The leather binding was cracked and worn, but the pages inside were surprisingly intact. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, and her breath caught when she saw the first line. The bunker under the station is sealed. No one must find it. If they do, we can't stop what's coming. Lily turned the pages quickly, scanning the text. The journal entries were vague, cryptic, and seemed to detail what appeared to be a secret operation of some kind. A hidden project, an underground facility perhaps connected to the Cold War, just like the rumors she'd heard as a kid. But the more she read, the more the entries seemed to point to something even more unsettling. The bunker wasn't just a storage area, it was something else entirely. Something tied to the government, to experiments, maybe even to the town's history of mysterious disappearances. Lily's pulse quickened. She had to know more. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she was getting closer to something far bigger than just a gas station renovation. Each clue she uncovered seemed to lead her deeper into a mystery that, for years, had been hidden beneath layers of dust and forgotten time. The journal, with its cryptic warnings, only fueled her growing suspicion that the bunker beneath the gas station was no ordinary storage space. And now, she couldn't help but wonder why it had been so carefully sealed away. The more she examined the papers, the more the strange documents seemed to connect to the town's history. Old newspaper clippings, faded reports, nothing clear, nothing that could be easily pieced together. There were mentions of underground facilities, special projects, and decommissioned installations, all tied to the gas station's location. But the lack of concrete details only made Lily's curiosity burn brighter. She spent the rest of the afternoon combing through the filing cabinet, hoping for something more substantial. But everything she found seemed either irrelevant or deliberately obscured. As she flipped through one last stack of papers, a sound made her pause, a quiet, soft clinking, almost like metal scraping against stone. Lily froze, heart hammering in her chest. Her breath caught in her throat. The sound came from the direction of the metal door, the one with the lock, the one she'd been avoiding but knew she'd eventually have to face. The noise stopped almost immediately, but the silence that followed felt heavier, more oppressive. "Okay, Lily," she muttered to herself. "This is it. You came this far." With a deep breath, she made her way to the ladder and climbed back up to the main floor of the garage. She felt a strange weight in her chest, a knot of unease that refused to go away. It wasn't just the fear of what she might find down there, it was the creeping realization that someone, or something, didn't want her to keep digging. Her eyes darted around the garage, which felt emptier than usual, like it was waiting for her next move. She glanced at the front door, still open, a thin sliver of daylight pouring in, but it didn't feel comforting today. The quiet felt wrong. The air in the garage had shifted. Lily took one last look at the far corner, at the hatch that led down to the bunker. She was no longer just a mechanic restoring a broken-down gas station. She was now part of something bigger, a mystery woven into the very fabric of this place. She had to know what was hidden in that bunker. Suddenly, the sound came again, a loud, distinct bang from the back of the station. She spun around, her pulse racing. The noise hadn't come from the bunker. It came from outside. Lily bolted out of the garage, heart in her throat. She stepped onto the cracked pavement, eyes scanning the empty lot. The sound had been loud enough to rattle her bones, but there was nothing in sight. Nothing but the silent, abandoned gas station. It was the middle of the afternoon, and the street outside was completely empty. No cars passing, no people. It wasn't the kind of place that saw a lot of foot traffic, but even so, it was unusual that the area seemed so still. The world felt too quiet, too empty. She walked toward the source of the noise, just past the edge of the property. The wind blew through the tall grass, but the street remained dead. Then, she noticed something, a scrap of paper fluttering near the fence line. The wind had carried it there, but the message on it caught her eye. She bent down and picked it up. "It's happening. Move quickly." Lily's blood ran cold. She turned the paper over, searching for more details, but it was blank. Just those words, scribbled in a hurried hand. She looked around again, but there was nothing. No one. Just the empty gas station and the unsettling stillness. Her thoughts raced. Who had left this, and what did it mean? The message felt like a warning, one that confirmed her worst fears. Whoever had sealed the bunker all those years ago didn't want this secret uncovered. And now, someone was trying to stop her from finding out the truth. Lily's hands trembled as she tucked the paper into her pocket. The quiet, once a companion, now felt oppressive. There was no turning back now. Whatever lay beneath this gas station, whatever it was that had been hidden for so long, was going to change everything. As she walked back into the garage, she realized that the noise she'd heard, the metal scraping and the strange clinking, hadn't been a figment of her imagination. The bunker was alive with something, and it wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, The message, tucked away in her pocket, gnawed at her mind, and the unsettling noise from the bunker still echoed in her ears. She stood still for a moment, taking in the quiet garage around her. It felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Her eyes drifted toward the metal door again, the one she knew she would eventually have to face. But not yet. Not today. Instead, she focused on the job at hand. The gas station was still full of debris and old tools, and she needed to keep moving. Every corner she turned, there was something else to be cleaned or fixed, something more to restore. The distractions were mounting, but she refused to let them derail her. She set to work clearing the garage, sweeping the dust, cleaning the counters. It was slow, tedious work, but at least it allowed her to think. She needed to focus. She had a vision for this place, a clean, thriving mechanic shop that would breathe new life into this forgotten town. It was her dream. The last thing she wanted was to get lost in the dark history of this building. But with every step she took, the past seemed to catch up with her. As the day wore on, Lily realized the strange sensation of being watched hadn't gone away. It wasn't just the empty building. It was as if something was lingering just beyond the walls, like there were eyes that weren't there. She rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the eerie feeling, and turned her attention back to the office. There were old filing cabinets there, half hidden behind piles of neglected paperwork. She'd glanced through them the day before, but now they seemed more urgent, like they were holding secrets that she was meant to uncover. Lily opened the first drawer, pulling out thick files with labels that seemed out of place. Property records, town blueprints, emergency response logs. These didn't match the mundane nature of a gas station's financial records. The more she flipped through, the more it became clear that the gas station's history was tied to something bigger, something that went back decades. There were town blueprints from the 60 seconds, and they all highlighted the gas station's location as a key emergency point. There were records of construction projects, but the names of the contractors and the work they did were all listed as classified. What was going on here? Her fingers hovered over one particular folder marked, redacted, "Do not open without clearance." Her curiosity flared, and for a moment, she almost walked away, but she couldn't resist. Lily slid the folder out and opened it carefully, as if the contents might be dangerous. Inside were several documents that had been heavily blacked out. Most of the words were indecipherable, but some sections had a few details that stood out. The most chilling was a brief mention of an underground installation. It referenced a Site 17 and a series of government-ordered containment protocols. The dates were from the early 1970 seconds, just after the station had been built, but before it had become the rundown place it was now. She read the sections she could, each sentence like a weight sinking deeper in her gut. It didn't make sense. The gas station, this small, unremarkable place, had been at the center of something far more sinister. It wasn't just abandoned. It had been forgotten for a reason. Lily pulled the rest of the folder out, desperate to find more. But the next document was even more strange. It was a letter, faded and brittle, the ink nearly gone but still legible. The handwriting was shaky, as if written by someone on edge. "We cannot afford another incident. The experiments have been contained for now, but we cannot trust anyone else to keep them hidden. Not after what happened in town last month. Our orders are clear: ensure that no one finds out. The bunker is to remain sealed." Her breath caught in her throat. This was bigger than a simple abandoned gas station. There had been something here, something hidden away, something dangerous. She couldn't understand why the town hadn't talked about this. The secrecy, the fear that had been passed down through generations, it was more than just a mystery. It felt like a warning. Lily shoved the letter into her jacket pocket. Her mind raced as she processed everything. She didn't know who they were, or what the experiments referred to. But there was one thing she was certain of now. Whatever was hidden in the bunker had been a part of something far larger, something the town had buried. As she turned to head back toward the garage, a noise from outside caught her attention. It was the sound of tires crunching over gravel, faint but growing louder. A car was pulling up. Lily's pulse quickened. Who would be here now? The engine of the car revved louder, and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She walked toward the front door, wiping her hands on her jeans, trying to push the unease from her mind. Whatever was happening here, whatever secrets the station held, she had to finish what she'd started. She swung the door open, stepping out into the warm afternoon Sunday. But it wasn't a stranger. It was a local old man, Clark, the town mechanic who'd worked in Silver Creek for decades. His car came to a slow stop just outside the lot. He looked up, a strange glint in his eye, before stepping out of the vehicle. "Been hearing things about this place, Lily," he said, his voice low and cautious. "You might want to know something about this station. Something the town's been trying to forget." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just about the station anymore. She was being pulled into something deeper. The words, "something the town's been trying to forget," echoed in Lily's mind as she stood face to face with Clark, his weathered eyes scanning her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. She wasn't sure if she was more shocked by the mysterious note in her pocket, the documents she'd just uncovered, or the sudden appearance of someone who seemed to know more than he was letting on. Lily didn't have time for small talk. There was too much at stake now, and whatever secrets Clark was about to reveal could be the key to everything. "You know about the bunker," she said, her voice steady despite the growing unease. Clark didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked over his shoulder, almost as if he expected someone to be listening. He took a deep breath, his face hardening before he spoke. "Everyone in this town has heard the rumors. Some of us have seen the signs. But most of us keep quiet about it. Pretend we don't know what happened here, what's buried in that God-forsaken place." Lily's heart pounded in her chest. It was happening, he was going to tell her. "But you, Lily, you're stubborn, like your dad," Clark continued, his voice softer now, almost regretful, "always poking around where you don't belong." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "That bunker beneath this station isn't just an old storage space. It's the site of things we'd rather leave forgotten. You don't want to go digging any deeper, trust me." Lily's grip tightened around the doorframe. "What happened there? What's inside the bunker?" Clark glanced at the ground, his weathered hands shifting nervously. "You really want to know?" "I need to know," she replied, her voice unwavering. She couldn't turn back now, not with everything she'd uncovered, not with the pull of something she couldn't explain. He sighed deeply, then nodded slowly. "All right. But you need to understand. The people here, they've kept it buried for a reason. And if you dig too deep, well, there are those who won't let the past come back." Lily waited, every muscle in her body tense, every nerve on edge. "Decades ago," Clark began, his voice low, "this place wasn't just a gas station. It was part of something bigger, a government operation. They used this station as a front, a cover for what they were really doing underneath it. You see, it wasn't just a bunker for supplies. It was a research facility, an experimental site, used for things that shouldn't have been done. The kind of things that people were never meant to know about." Lily's mind spun as she processed his words. A government operation? Research? The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they didn't make sense. What kind of experiments would have taken place here, in this small town? And why had they been kept hidden for so long? "They were testing things," Clark continued, his eyes darkening. "Human testing, mostly. The kind of stuff that was hush-hush, things they didn't want anyone talking about. But one of the experiments went wrong, and everything was sealed up, locked away, hidden." Lily felt the coldness of his words settle deep in her chest. The bunker wasn't just a secret, it was a prison. And whatever had happened here had been too dangerous, too destructive to leave behind. That's why the place was abandoned. The whole station was shut down after the incident. They tried to sweep it under the rug, move on. But some of us remember. Some of us saw things we were never meant to see. "Like what?" Lily asked, barely able to contain the urgency in her voice. Clark hesitated. "I saw people, strangers, coming and going from the station at odd hours. They'd go down into the basement, but never come back. Others I knew. They changed. I didn't stick around long enough to see what happened next, but I know it wasn't just an accident. It was something deliberate." something they wanted to cover up. Lily swallowed hard. A sinking feeling spread through her. The town wasn't just hiding the bunker. They were hiding something worse. Something that had to do with the people who had disappeared. "There are records," Clark said, his voice barely a whisper. "Documents that were taken by people who worked here before it shut down. The town council keeps them locked away. They're the ones who don't want the truth getting out. You can't trust them." Lily felt her blood run cold. The town council, the very people who had maintained control over Silver Creek for years, they were complicit. "There's more," Clark said, his voice barely audible. "I don't know all the details, but I do know this. If you go down there, if you open that door, you're not just digging up old secrets. You're opening the door to something that was meant to stay buried." Lily's thoughts raced. She'd uncovered pieces of a story, but this was bigger than she had imagined. Her curiosity, her need for answers, burned brighter than ever. But Clark's warning was clear. The deeper she went, the more dangerous it would become. "Why are you telling me this?" Lily asked, her voice softening. "If you know all this, why don't you just leave it alone?" Clark's eyes flickered with something dark. "Because I saw what it did to people, what it did to this town. And I can't let you make the same mistakes I did." Lily took a step back, heart pounding. This was no longer just about fixing a gas station. It was about uncovering the dark truth of what had happened, and what still might be hidden beneath the surface. As she turned to go back inside, the air around her felt charged, like a storm was gathering. The door to the bunker wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a threshold. And she had no choice but to cross it. Lily stood in the doorway of the garage, the faint hum of the overhead lights buzzing above her. She had come here with a vision, a dream, to turn an abandoned gas station into a thriving mechanic shop. But now, everything had changed. The secrets buried beneath this building, the history it was built on, had become too dangerous to ignore. And with every step she took, she could feel the weight of the past pressing down on her shoulders. Her mind swirled with Clark's words. The bunker, the experiments, the government cover-up, it felt like a puzzle she wasn't equipped to solve. But there was no turning back. She had to know the truth. The sound of tires crunching on gravel outside snapped her from her thoughts. Lily's eyes darted toward the window, and her breath hitched when she saw a black sedan parked across the lot. The windows were tinted dark, and the engine had just been turned off. She didn't know why, but an instinct, one that she couldn't ignore, told her to be cautious. Lily reached for her phone, but the buzzing noise of the garage door opening made her freeze. She slowly turned, eyes narrowing as she watched a figure step inside. It was a woman, tall and sharp-featured, dressed in a dark business suit. Her presence felt out of place in the dilapidated garage. "Lily James?" The woman's voice was smooth, too smooth. It didn't sound like a simple greeting. There was something unnerving about the way she said her name. Lily didn't answer right away. She took a cautious step back, her hand resting on the toolbox by her side. "That depends on who's asking," she said, her voice steady despite the unease spreading through her. The woman smiled, her lips thin. "My name is Morgan Fields. I'm here on behalf of the Silver Creek Historical Preservation Committee. We've heard about your little project." Lily's heart skipped a beat. The Historical Preservation Committee? Why would they care about her buying an old gas station? Morgan continued, unfazed by Lily's wariness. "I'm sure you've already uncovered some interesting things about this property. Things that might be better left alone." Her gaze slid toward the back of the garage, where the floor had been disturbed, the space where Lily had found the hidden hatch leading to the bunker below. Lily straightened, her grip tightening on the wrench she had picked up from the bench. "What do you mean by better left alone?" Morgan took a step closer, her expression unreadable. "You're digging into things you don't understand. Trust me, this place, this town, has its secrets, and not all of them are meant to be found." Lily's jaw tightened. "I'm not afraid of secrets. I'm trying to fix this place, not tear it down." "Fixing the station is one thing," Morgan said, her voice colder now. "But fixing what's hidden underneath, that's something entirely different. You don't know what you're dealing with. Lily stepped forward, no longer intimidated. Maybe I don't know everything, but I'm not backing down now. I found something, and I'm going to finish what I started. Morgan studied her for a moment, her eyes calculating. You have no idea what's in that bunker, do you? Lily's pulse quickened. She was done with the games. Tell me what you know. For a moment, Morgan didn't respond. Then she sighed, a faint flicker of hesitation in her eyes before she spoke again. This town was involved in something decades ago. Something that goes beyond just this station. The government was testing human subjects, trying to create something extraordinary. The bunker holds the remains of those experiments, records, files, and worse. People died down there. Some of them never left. Lily's breath caught. What do you mean, never left? Morgan glanced around, then lowered her voice. The government never intended to leave behind any evidence, but they failed. That bunker? It's not just a storage room, it's a containment unit. And the people who went in there, they didn't just disappear. They became part of something else, something that was never meant to escape. Lily felt the room closing in on her, the walls pressing in as Morgan's words sank in. The bunker, the experiments, everything was connected. The mystery she had uncovered was more dangerous than she had imagined. I know what you're thinking, Morgan continued, her voice low and almost pitying. You think you're going to fix things, but you won't. There are people in this town who have spent years making sure the past stays buried. They won't let you ruin everything. Lily's hands were shaking, but she refused to back down. I'm not afraid of them. I've come this far. I'm not stopping now. Morgan studied her one last time before nodding, almost as if she had expected this. You don't have a choice. You might think you're in control, but once you open that door, there's no going back. Whatever you find in that bunker, it will change you. It will change everything. Lily stood there for a long moment, her mind racing. There were more people involved in this than she had realized, people who didn't want the truth to come to light. And yet, there was a part of her, the same stubborn part, that had driven her to buy the station in the first place, that refused to let go. I'll take my chances, she said, her voice steady. I'm going down there, and I'm going to find out what's really hidden beneath this place. Morgan didn't say another word. She turned and walked toward the door, pausing just before she stepped outside. Don't say I didn't warn you, she called over her shoulder, before disappearing into the shadows outside. Lily stood there for a long time, her breath coming in sharp bursts. She could feel the weight of the decision she was about to make. The door to the bunker, what it held, could change everything, but it was a door she couldn't leave closed. With a final glance at the garage, Lily turned toward the back, toward the hatch, and the dark unknown that awaited her below. Lily's heart pounded in her chest as she made her way toward the hatch at the back of the garage. Morgan's warning still rang in her ears, a haunting echo that wouldn't leave her alone. Once you open that door, there's no going back. But Lily was already too far in. She couldn't walk away now, not after everything she had uncovered. The bunker beneath the gas station was no longer just a curiosity. It was a key, and she was determined to unlock it. The day had turned into evening, the last rays of sunlight casting long shadows across the parking lot as Lily crouched beside the metal hatch. Her hands were steady, but there was a tremor beneath her skin that she couldn't shake. She knew this wasn't just about fixing up an old gas station anymore. It was about uncovering a truth that had been buried for decades, a truth that had been kept hidden for a reason. With a deep breath, she reached for the latch and pulled. The metal squealed as it gave way, revealing the dark, narrow ladder leading down into the earth. The air that rose from the opening was damp and musty, thick with the scent of mold and rot. It was colder than it should have been, as if the ground below had been sealed off from the world above for far too long. Lily hesitated for a moment, glancing back toward the garage. It was quiet, too quiet. She knew she wasn't alone, but there was no one else in sight. It was as though the whole town had been holding its breath, waiting for her to make this one decision. She gritted her teeth and descended the ladder, her boots tapping softly against the rungs. The air grew heavier as she reached the bottom. the faint scent of earth and decay filling her nostrils. The concrete floor was cracked in places, the walls lined with old pipes and wires that had long since stopped working. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the door at the far end of the room, the one that had been locked for so many years, the one that had been kept sealed and hidden. Lily's hand reached for the rusted doorknob, her fingers brushing against the cold metal. There was a strange sense of finality in the gesture, as if she were about to cross some invisible line, and yet there was no going back now. She turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the rest of the basement. It was organized, almost clinical in its starkness. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty containers and old crates. Papers were scattered across a long table in the center of the room, some yellowed with age, others still fresh but covered in dust. A single light flickered overhead, casting long, uneven shadows across the space. Lily stepped inside, her footsteps muffled by the thick dust beneath her boots. She felt the weight of the silence press down on her, suffocating in its intensity. The bunker was more than just a storage facility. It was a place of secrets, of things that had been kept from the world. And now, she was standing in the middle of it. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the papers scattered across the table. They were official-looking documents, some stamped with the insignia of government agencies she didn't recognize. She moved closer, her breath quickening as she reached for the nearest stack. The first document she pulled from the pile was a folder marked classified, top secret. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it. Inside, there were blueprint schematics for the gas station, but these weren't ordinary blueprints. They showed not just the layout of the station, but something beneath it, an underground facility, a complex system of rooms and hallways, all leading to a central chamber. Lily's pulse raced as she flipped through the papers. The designs were meticulous, almost too precise, as if someone had planned every inch of this place with care. And at the bottom of the last page was a single line of text that sent a chill down her spine. Experiment 47. Containment Protocols. Failure. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Containment. Failure. The implication was clear. Whatever had been kept down here, whatever had been hidden for so long, had been dangerous, and it had escaped. Her hands shook as she set the folder aside and reached for the next document. This one was a report, dated decades ago. The ink was faded, but the words were still legible. We have successfully contained the subject for now, but further testing is required. The subject exhibits unpredictable behavior and has shown signs of aggression. The containment facility remains secure for the time being, but we recommend continued monitoring. Further action may be necessary. The report ended abruptly, as if someone had torn off the last page. Lily's mind raced. The subject? What was it? And what had happened to the people involved in this operation? She flipped through more papers, each one more disturbing than the last. They spoke of failed experiments, strange occurrences, and a growing sense of panic as the project went on. It became clear that the gas station had been a front for something far more sinister, a series of government-funded experiments gone horribly wrong. But there was one detail that stood out more than anything else. A name. Project Titan. Lily stared at the words, her mind racing. This wasn't just a research project, it was something else. Something so dangerous that the government had gone to extreme lengths to keep it contained. And now, the bunker was the only thing standing between the town and whatever had been set loose. A loud crash from behind her jolted Lily from her thoughts. She spun around, her heart racing. The door she had just entered through slammed shut with a deafening bang. The room went pitch black. Lily's breath hitched in the sudden darkness. The sharp, unexpected slam of the door sent an electric pulse of fear through her. She instinctively reached for the flashlight in her pocket, fumbling in the dark, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Her fingers closed around the flashlight. She twisted the cap, and a narrow beam of light cut through the blackness. The room around her seemed to stretch out in endless shadows, the papers on the table and the shelves now mere silhouettes. The air in the bunker felt thicker, more suffocating. She shined the light toward the door, but there was no sign of movement. The door was firmly shut, the handle still cold and immovable. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by her ragged breathing. Lily forced herself to calm down, mentally ticking through the possibilities. She had to keep her wits about her. The documents she'd found were disturbing, but they weren't enough to unravel the whole mystery. She needed more. The truth was buried here, in this room, and she wouldn't stop until she uncovered it all. She approached the table, her light trembling slightly, as she swept it over the remaining papers. The word Project Titan still lingered in her mind, like a cold shiver. What was Titan? What had the government been doing here all those years ago? She needed to know. As she picked up another file, something metallic clinked from somewhere behind her. Lily froze, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. The noise was low, but unmistakable. It came from somewhere in the far corner of the room. Lily's pulse quickened. She turned the flashlight slowly, its beam cutting through the darkness. For a brief moment, she saw the shape of something, a shadow, perhaps moving against the far wall. Her mind raced as she processed the sight. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice sharp, echoing through the empty space. There was no response. But the clinking continued, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone scraping against the concrete floor. The noises grew louder, closer. Fear wrapped itself tightly around Lily's chest. She had no idea what she was dealing with, but whatever it was coming closer. With no other option, Lily backed toward the far wall, the light now focusing on the source of the noise. There, in the corner of the room, a metal grate was partially open. The scraping noise was coming from inside it. Something or someone was trying to force their way out. Lily's breath came in shallow gasps as the beam of light illuminated what was inside. The faintest movement, the flutter of something alive. It was a cage, and it was occupied. Her stomach lurched as she stepped closer, her heart pounding. The creature or person inside was huddled in the shadows, barely visible. The flashlight flickered for a moment, as if reacting to the presence in the corner, casting eerie shadows across the walls. "Hello?" Lily's voice quivered, barely above a whisper. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the figure in the cage. Then, the figure shifted. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, it rose to its feet, a low groan escaping its lips. Lily took another step forward, her legs feeling like lead. The creature, if it could even be called, that was human, but not entirely. Its skin was pale, almost ashen, its hair disheveled and matted. It wore ragged clothing, barely held together by frayed threads. But the most unsettling thing about it was its eyes, bright, unnaturally wide, and locked onto her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. Lily took a step back. The figure's gaze was piercing, and though it was weak, it exuded a sense of desperation, as though it hadn't seen anyone in years. The way it moved, slow and deliberate, sent chills down her spine. "What are you?" Lily whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. The figure didn't respond. It was as though it couldn't speak. But as Lily continued to stare, something clicked in her mind. She had seen this before, those eyes, that skin. It was a face from the file, one of the experimental subjects mentioned in the documents. This was no accident. This was Project Titan. Lily's hand shook as she pointed the flashlight directly at the figure. She could see more clearly now. The person was weak, shackled to the wall by chains that looked like they'd rusted long ago. But it was alive. It was human. And it had been down here, trapped in this bunker for far too long. "What happened to you?" Lily asked, her voice trembling, but the figure did not respond. It simply stood there, staring at her, an empty expression in its eyes. Lily could feel her heartbeat in her throat. She knew she should be terrified, but instead, a deep sense of pity settled over her. This person, this creature, was part of something far bigger than her. And yet, it was just a broken soul, locked away for who knew how long. She slowly moved toward the grate, crouching down as she shined the light on the figure's face. It was a man young, maybe in his 20s, his face gaunt and hollowed out by hunger and time. The remnants of what he might have once been were still visible in his features. He looked human, but something had been stripped from him, something that would never return. As she reached out a trembling hand, the figure's eyes flashed with something recognition. Hope? Then, without warning, he lunged forward, rattling the chains in a sudden burst of movement, his eyes wide with fear. Lily recoiled, stumbling back in shock. She could hear his labored breathing, feel the desperation in his movements. He was trapped. He had been here for so long that even the smallest sign of freedom seemed to send him into a frenzy. "Calm down!" Lily shouted, but it was no use. The man continued to thrash against the chains, his body convulsing with an unholy energy as if something deep inside him had snapped. Lily backed away slowly, feeling the walls of the bunker close in on her. She needed to get out. She needed to. The lights flickered once more, the air in the bunker growing colder. Suddenly, the power cut out entirely. The room plunged into darkness. The darkness swallowed Lily whole. Her heart thundered in her chest as she stumbled backward, hands reaching for anything to steady herself. The flashlight in her hand had gone completely dead, its weak beam flickering out with a final, heartbreaking whimper. Her eyes strained in the pitch-black room, but she couldn't see a thing. The air felt thick, like it had turned to syrup, suffocating in its weight. The silence that followed the flicker of lights was all-consuming. The man, Project Titan, she thought was still thrashing in his cage, the chains rattling, but his movements were more erratic now, frantic, as if he could feel the growing terror around him. What was this place? Lily's mind raced. She had walked into the unknown without a second thought, but now the weight of it all felt unbearable. The documents, the warnings, the files detailing human experiments, all of it had led her here, to this moment. But now, she was trapped. She didn't know what was down here or who else was involved, but she knew it was more than just an abandoned gas station. It was a symbol of something much darker. She tried to steady her breath, her hands trembling. This wasn't just about uncovering a story, it was about survival. She had to think. She had to get out. The rattling chains of the man in the cage grew louder, more intense. It was as though his fear and panic were reverberating through the walls, infecting everything around her. But just as quickly as the noise had escalated, it stopped, and then she heard it, a faint shuffle of footsteps. Lily froze. The sound wasn't coming from the man in the cage. It was coming from the other side of the room, where the darkness was even thicker. Her breath caught in her throat as the footsteps grew louder, closer. She could feel the weight of someone or something approaching her. Her mind screamed for her to run, to flee, but her body was paralyzed, frozen in place. She could hear her own breathing, shallow and ragged, mingling with the distant echoes of the approaching steps. The air around her seemed to constrict. The power had gone out, but there was something else, something ancient in the walls, in the very foundation of the bunker, that seemed to pulse with life. Lily had felt it before, but now it was undeniable. This place was alive with secrets, and it wasn't going to let her leave so easily. The footsteps stopped just behind her. She spun around, panic rising in her throat. But when she whipped around, there was nothing there, just the vast blackness. The floor creaked, and then, a voice. "You're not supposed to be here." The words were a rasp, a whisper barely audible, yet they sent a bolt of terror through Lily's spine. Her eyes strained in the darkness, but she couldn't make out a thing. The voice came again, this time louder, closer. "This place is meant to stay hidden. It's not for you to understand." Lily's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She had to get out, had to move, but she didn't know where to go. The fear gripping her felt suffocating, the weight of the past crashing in on her from every angle. And then, the lights flickered on. The sudden blinding light filled the room, momentarily blinding her. She raised a hand to shield her eyes, but before she could fully adjust, a figure emerged from the shadows. A tall man, older than she had expected, with dark, piercing eyes and a demeanor that suggested he knew far more than he was letting on. He stood in front of her, blocking her path to the exit. "You shouldn't have opened it," he said, his voice low and calm, as though he had known this moment would come for years. You don't understand what you've unleashed. Lily's chest tightened. Who was this man? And how did he know? I don't care about your secrets, she snapped, her voice shaky but defiant. I need to know what happened here. What's been hidden beneath this station all this time? What is Project Titan? The man's eyes flickered, but there was no surprise. He had expected this. It was supposed to be buried. He muttered, almost to himself. But now it's out of our hands. The experiment wasn't just about control, about power. It was about something else, something bigger than any of us. Lily stepped forward, her voice firm. I don't care about your excuses. Tell me what happened here. The man paused, his gaze shifting toward the cage. The man inside it had gone silent, his eyes locked onto Lily, as though he knew what was about to happen next. The truth is, Lily, you've opened Pandora's box. Project Titan wasn't just a research project. It was a plan to create something beyond human, something beyond control. But they failed. And now, whatever's down here, it's awake again, and it will never go back to sleep. Lily's mind reeled. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows lengthening. The man's words sank in slowly, like a stone sinking in water, until they settled deep in her chest. This wasn't just about the gas station. It wasn't just about the town. It was about the future. The future had been sealed away beneath these walls. And now, it was waking up. The man stepped aside, allowing her to see the full scope of the bunker. The walls, once lined with shelves, now stood as empty reminders of what had been. The equipment was gone, but the stains on the walls, the dark marks that could never be wiped clean, remained. And in the far corner of the room, she saw a large containment chamber, a glass box, now cracked and broken. Something had been locked inside that chamber, something that had escaped. Lily turned to the man, a question burning on her lips. What is it? He looked at her with an expression of pity. That's what you're about to find out. And in that moment, Lily realized that the secrets of the gas station weren't just buried beneath its floors. They were alive.